Okay, welcome everybody to ATI Talks. My name is Niels van der Linden. I'm a senior director at Capgemini Invent, and together with my colleague Raymond de Wijzen, will be your host for this session. Today we will talk about the concept of data sharing, and we will do so with Petteri Kivimäki and Ville Sirviö of the Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions. Welcome both, Ville, Petteri. Much appreciated that you took the time to be with us today. I'd like you to ask you to shortly introduce yourselves first.
Thank you for inviting. So my name is Ville Sirviö and I'm the CEO of the Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions.
Hello everyone, my name is Petteri Kivimäki and I am the CTO of Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions, NIIS for short.
Great, thank you very much. Before we start and dig into the questions we have for you, a few words on the ATI project and the objective of this talk. ATI stands for Advanced Technologies for Industry. It's a project commissioned by EASME and DG GROW and contributes to the EU's industrial policy approach and to promote the creation of a competitive European industry. It brings a systematic monitoring of technological trends and reliable up-to-date data on advanced technologies to support implementation of policies and initiatives. And to this end, the consortium has collected data on the creation and use of advanced technologies and produced various reports on technological trends, sectoral insights, and policy measures and tools. Ray.
Yeah, so one of these technologies that is covered is data sharing. And with data sharing, we refer to the practices, technologies, cultural elements, and also legal elements that make the exchange of digital information possible. Sharing data between organizations, either public or private, helps create new opportunities for business, spurs innovation, and can help unlock the true potential that lies in data. The ATI Talks serves to better understand the potential of data sharing for the public sector, but also for industry and SMEs in particular, and the barriers that need to be overcome. And we will address the actions of the European Commission therein and focus on an example of use case in this sense, X-Road and the Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions. Maybe to kick it off, Ville, Petteri, X-Road and the NIIS is a practice example of data sharing in our opinion. Could you maybe perhaps explain in simple terms what it is that X-Road does for its users and why data sharing is a prerequisite for its success?
So X-Road is an ecosystem solution, first of all. So it is providing a way for exchanging data, also for data sharing in an ecosystem. And it's based on a four-corner model. So every organization joining the ecosystem is setting up an access point, which is a security server. And this is the basis of X-Road. So everything is based on the ecosystem idea and the security servers as the access points, exchanging data between each other. So this is like the overall concept of X-Road, and Petteri would probably add something on the technical side of the implementation of X-Road.
Well, I think that was a very good overall description, but just to give a practical example of benefits that X-Road provides, the good way to understand X-Road is to compare it to point-to-point integrations, which is the most common way probably to connect information systems. So when you use point-to-point connections, you need to configure and agree on all the details of the data exchange every time when you establish a new connection between two information systems. But with X-Road, you have to set up your access point to the ecosystem, which is the security server, like Ville mentioned. And once you have the access point, then it is your entry point to the ecosystem, and you use it to access all the information systems of all other organizations, meaning that you only have to set up the access point once, and after that, all the details of the data exchange, they are taken care of for you by the access point. So the initial investment maybe is bigger, but then the more connections you have, the more you use X-Road, then the benefits will come through that.
Okay, thank you for that. I would normally ask you trust is essential when it comes to data sharing. How do you make sure the system is trusted? I don't know if this applies in the setting that you just described.
Yes, it applies very much because when we think about an ecosystem, I think that the foundation of the ecosystem is trust, so that the members they can trust each other, and that is one of the key elements of X-Road. And the trust is based on public key infrastructure, PKI, in X-Road, so keys and certificates. And in practice, it means that when a new organization joins the X-Road ecosystem, it must go through an onboarding process during which its identity is verified, and at the end of the process, a certificate will be issued, and then the organization will use that certificate, or actually those certificates, because there are several different kind of certificates, but implementation details. But then when data is exchanged, those certificates are used to verify the identity of the organization. So yeah, I would say that trust is very important in the X-Road ecosystem.
So without that guarantee of certification, an organization cannot contribute to the ecosystem, if I understand correctly.
Yes, that is correct. So even if X-Road is open source and anyone can download the software, install it, but without getting the certificates, going through the onboarding process to an X-Road ecosystem, they cannot start to exchange data with other organizations using X-Road. So you could describe it as a trusted network between organizations.
Okay, I see. Clear. Thank you. Besides the clear added value for public sector organizations, how are other enterprises involved in X-Roads, and how do they benefit?
This is an interesting question, because when we talk about the private sector and X-Road, well, let's take an example of Estonia. They have a very high percentage of whole society included in their X-Road ecosystem. So also private sector, also private enterprises, companies are active users of X-Road. So of course, that is one way how X-Road as a technology is affecting. If it is implemented nationally, it allows for data sharing between the public and private sectors very easily. And if we think about other aspects of X-Road, it can also be implemented in the private sector. So it can be used, for example, within a corporation. It could be used for a cross-border case within different units of corporation. This is actually a real-life example that I have heard about. So yeah, that's one of the aspects. And if you think about the overall benefits of X-Road, those are usually the ecosystem benefits. It's also about implementing once only principle, and all of these actions are actually in the benefit of the private companies as well, making the data sharing, making data exchange more easy. But as it was said earlier by myself and Petteri, so it's an ecosystem solution, so also realizing all of the benefits might take some years. So when starting with X-Road, it doesn't come like overnight, but it requires years to be really built up into a full ecosystem with benefits.
And out of all these benefits, what would you say is the predominant or the greatest benefit? And then maybe for SMEs in particular, for industry?
Well, I wouldn't like separate the benefits by any sectors or any like specific subsectors. I would rather say that it's benefiting society as a whole, and it's depending on the implementation model and the country how the benefits actually realize.
On the concept of data sharing in general, share your views on how you see that as it can spur growth of European enterprises in general.
Yeah, thinking about the data sharing and its benefits, how it's like supporting the growth. Well, I think it's essential because companies are more and more dependent of different types of data. And one project I have been involved in myself has been the Nordic Smart Government, in which the real-time economy has been like put forward between Nordic enterprises and SMEs, especially in the Nordic region. And it has been interesting to follow how much of benefits we can see in it, but on the other hand, how difficult it is actually to go forward. So those are usually not easy projects because it involves lots of different parties and it's required to make changes in the existing systems, change the existing models of data sharing, change some legislation even. So those can be actually quite complex projects to promote data sharing between SMEs and with SMEs and the public administration. It sounds always easy, yeah, let's share data, but when you go deeper into the projects, you can see that it's actually quite a complicated world still.
Is it possible to give an example of that from your experience?
Well, let's take an example. If we think about real-time economy, the idea of companies sharing data in almost real time, of course, it doesn't necessarily always mean like real time, but let's say rather quickly. So that kind of project requires already changes in the existing accounting systems, in some of the existing payment systems. It requires companies to adapt new technology or to develop new technology. It is also changing market a little bit in some cases. Like we have an ongoing discussion in some countries about if we are enabling real-time economy, at the same time doing new developments, should those be made by the private sector? If private sector is not willing to do those developments, should those be carried by the public sector? And if public sector is intervening in this process, is it okay? Because it's actually having some effect in the market. And again, it's having an effect on the SMEs, which are working in the software industry. And finally, it's having an effect in the companies utilizing the technology, whether they develop themselves, buy it from the private sector, or wait for the public sector to jump in. So this is an example of the complex situation of public-private collaboration when real-time economy should be implemented. But I think it is just one of the few examples. So the more we have data sharing, the more complexity issues we have actually. Yeah, it's not an easy field.
And then Ville, what would you recommend others who set up similar initiatives? And what are the main barriers in this regard? Because you mentioned it's not easy, it's often hard to share data. Although we advocate hard for it, there can be a reluctance here, there can be barriers. What are those barriers and how can we overcome them?
When I was working with the Nordic Smart Government project and I was giving some input for the future roadmap and what should be implemented in that project, I was recommending that they should pay special attention to change management and applying some framework and making sure that certain steps are taken to ensure that there is the desire and there is the support for the project, because everything what we do is from the people to people. So there has to be the motivation, there has to be the desire. And very often with SMEs and with the private sector, if there is no trust, if there is no desire, if there is no the willingness for change, it can be a very heavy task to implement. So actually, when we talk about technology, when we talk about making big structural changes in data sharing or enabling new data sharing, I would say that making people understand the benefits, feel motivated, have the desire to work on it, that would be the first task. So I would really pay attention to humans and how the humans communicate and how they buy in new things. So I would really support that idea.
So the technology provides the platform, but then it's ultimately still humans that have to make it work.
Yeah, something like that, but it makes no sense to discuss about technology if no one is willing to implement it. So we always have to somehow build the idea of this is something which is beneficial, this is something what we can, and next comes the discussion who is doing and how it is technically implemented. But without the desire, no change will happen.
Do you see a role, sorry to interrupt, Rayam, do you see a role for, let's say, Europe in that sense, to further promote the concept or and to convince others to take this forward?
Well, I think Europe is taking certain steps already in the right direction, and I'm really happy about what has been released recently about the future European developments, and we all know about the digital future and recovery after the COVID, so let's hope it goes this way. And I'm also very keenly following the building of e-delivery, and we are also participating in that work from the Nordic Institute for Interoperability Solutions. So we have certain developments going on to support the e-delivery especially, and also to enable some new cases on X-Road. So we cannot like just lean on one technology, but we have to be collaborating, we have to follow different technologies being implemented in Europe and be active in that field.
I think you stole my last question, Niels.
Yeah, you're right. Any before we close the talk, Ville and Petteri, is there any final message you would like to share with the audience on data sharing or on the X-Road?
I would maybe just underline the importance of remembering the mechanism that everything we do is based on people. It's what we do together. It's about collaboration. And what I especially would always like to avoid in any data exchange or data sharing initiatives is a sort of horse race between different parties and countries. So we are not competing, but we are working together. Different countries have to have a good collaboration. It's necessary to work together, and it's especially necessary to work together in Europe for the same goals we have and the values we share.
Great. Thanks, Ville. I believe that's a very good conclusion to this session. Thank you very much for being here with us and sharing your views and experiences. We would like to welcome our viewers of this talk to look up the related reports and studies on the ATI website or on the website, of course, of the NIIS. And of course, we're happy to receive any further questions you might have. I would like to thank everyone for viewing, and until the next ATI talk. Thank you.